You want more than just the headlines? Find out what's going on and what it means with me, Dennis Prager, this morning at 11, right here on AM 560, The Answer.
Dan and Amy, so some optimism and an even hand from Larry Kudlow, President Trump's chief economic advisor, when he took to the podium to address the press yesterday, talking about President Trump's upcoming meeting with President Xi. Larry Kudlow said the following.
In his view, there's a good possibility that a deal can be made, and that he is open to that. He is open to that.
But any deal must include addressing these issues.
Issues of intellectual property theft must be solved. Forced technology transfers must be solved. Significant tariffs and non-tariff barriers must be solved. Issues of ownership have to be solved. The President will probably reiterate his view. We want a world, ideally, of zero tariffs, zero non-tariff barriers, and zero subsidies.
Well, that is a world that I want as well. I don't know that we're getting closer to that world. By the way, CNBC reporting a study out that was commissioned by Koch Industries that suggests that Trump's trade policies, tariffs, taxes, could cost Americans $915 each, or $2,400 per household, in the form of higher prices, lower wages, and lower investment returns in 2019. If the tariffs stay in place, the losses could add up to more than $17,000 per household by 2030. Well, that's a bit of a long range to take, since President Trump will be in office no longer than 2024. But anyway, in terms of the long-term implications of these sorts of taxing your way to prosperity, populist-style policies, which is how I would describe them, not in a complimentary fashion, for perhaps the other side of the argument. We're pleased to be joined again by our friend Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal columnist, chief economist for CNN. Steve, how are we doing on our journey to a zero tariff, zero non-tariff barrier, zero subsidy world?
Well, hi, guys. Look, I find myself somewhere in between where you are, Dan, and where Donald Trump is. I mean, certainly I agree that, tariff is a tax. So there's no question about that. And it does cost consumers. So when you go to Walmart and buy things, if we're putting tariffs on Chinese goods, you're going to have to pay a little bit more for the toothpaste and the toys and the textiles and the clothing you might buy. So that's absolutely true. But I also agree with Donald Trump that when it comes to China, we can't live with the status quo any longer, that this is an abusive relationship. And for those who have been in abusive relationships, they know that China is all take and no give. And they have, Larry Kudlow is exactly right that they are stealing our intellectual property, which is theft. That's not free trade. That's theft. They're just stealing our copyrights and our computer software and our drugs and our vaccines, and they're not paying us for it, and that's a big problem. And so, I am somewhat hopeful that if Donald Trump can get a win, and by the way, I don't think they're going to get a resolution in Argentina. I think China is not ready to make the kind of deal that needs to be made. But look, I applaud Trump for getting very, very tough with China. Now, that said, I do think that the steel and auto tariffs, the steel and aluminum tariffs have been really dim-witted, and they're actually hurting the economy and hurting jobs more than they're helping. So I'm not a sycophant for Trump, but some things he does I think are wise, and other things I think he does on trade are very poorly conceived. But look, we got to win with China. We can't keep allowing them to be so abusive to us.
Yeah, but what about, come on, putting 10% tariff tax on our iPhones now and laptops? That sent Apple stock plummeted by 1.2% yesterday just on his comment alone. But I don't want to pay for that. Why are consumers involved in this?
So let's take your example of Apple. I was talking to an Apple executive a few weeks ago, and they were saying that in China there are something like over 100 Apple stores in China. Mm-hmm. Do you know how many of those stores are actually owned by Apple? Like 5 of them. So what China does is they basically take the Apple insignia and they slap it on the door of the store. They say, we're Apple. But they're not Apple. That would be like, Amy, you and I saying, hey, let's go start a Burger King. And we just, put a Burger King sign up in front of our hamburger joint and say, we're Burger King. I mean, you can't do that. That's a violation of the property rights of the companies, of American companies. And I'm just using that as a little example of the kind of abusive. Look, China's no longer, a teenage economy. It is now a superpower. They are rivaling the United States for superpower status. Now they're not there yet, but they want to be. And we have to stop treating them like they're an infant and start treating them like an adult economy. And if they're going to be, they got to put their big boy pants on. They got to start following the rules. And they can't. Look, I talk to businessmen and women all the time. They say it's almost impossible to do business in China today. You can't sell stuff over there because of their trade practices. So that is not free trade. And Amy, it ain't free trade.
And the way that we're going to get them to hew the line is by punishing American consumers. That makes sense.
Well, look, I mean, Trump has said many times that these tariffs he's imposing, this is a stick. He is using this stick as a negotiating tactic to get them to change their behavior. And I'll ask the same question to you that I asked the senators when I testified on this a few weeks ago. If we're not going to use tariffs to change their behavior, how do we change their behavior? Because you can't stay in an abusive relationship.
Yeah, I don't know that.
But I'm being abused.
I mean, yeah, obviously theft, piracy is abusive, and there are these sort of international courts of law.
Oh, come on!
I know.
We're going to go to the WTO, and we're going to have a grievance against that. And what is the?
I know.
Next thing you know, you're going to say we go to the United Nations.
I know, but so there's that. So that's fine. Then let's show the folly of these international organizations. Then number one, number two.
That's true.
The way to deal with China is to be unilaterally free trade, is to lower the cost for our consumers while the China punishes theirs. That's the way.
Well, I think there's something to be said for that. Look, you can point to countries like Hong Kong that have no tariffs, and they're just unilateral free trade. And, anybody wants to bring anything into Hong Kong, they can do it, and that's good for their consumers. But I just think we're in a rivalry that is not just about economics. It's also about our national security. China is becoming extremely dangerous in terms of their military actions and their actions in terms of spending more and more money on their military and engaging in very aggressive behavior in the Asian peninsula there. So, look, I think we need to acknowledge. And I guess you guys aren't there yet. We need to acknowledge we're in a Cold War with China right now. They're not a friend. They're not an ally. They are an enemy. They are an adversary now, and they act that way. And Trump's right. They laugh behind our back that we just take this. It's like we have a kick me sign on, and I'm saying let's take the kick me sign off. And you guys are saying, no, keep kicking us.
Speaking of getting kicked, what do you think about
here we go.
What do you think about Trump's saber rattling in the direction of GM after the layoffs and the plant closures were announced?
Well, first of all, I think the media sensation about this has been way overblown. I mean, oh, my God, we're losing factory jobs. The manufacturing is disappearing. That's the most nonsensical thing I've ever heard. Since Donald Trump was elected, we have created 1 million, just shy of 1 million new manufacturing and construction jobs. We have more blue-collar jobs in this country today than we can possibly fill. So, a couple plants are closing down, and I'm not making light of this for the families that are affected. That's a very negative thing for their personal lives. But, for every factory that's closing down in America today, we're building 10 new ones. I mean, we don't have a shortage of blue-collar jobs today. We've got a surplus of them.
So but I don't like Trump calling. No,
Trump is right, by the way. Sorry, let me just say one thing. I mean, I think Trump is wrong when he says, well, this is because of the what was he saying the other day?
Well, he threatened to pull government subsidies for General Motors in response to their layoffs.
Well, we shouldn't give subsidies, right? Why does General Motors get, or Chrysler, or Ford get any subsidies? I'm against all corporate welfare. The federal government does not have the authority to give money to companies.
Well, I understand that, Steve, but he's not making a policy pronouncement across the board. He's specifically targeting GM,
I know.
That's the problem.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, the last thing we want is Washington telling American companies where to build factories and where to close them down. I mean, that's absurd. I'm totally with you on that. And that's just Trump being Trump. Look, sometimes he acts like he's the oracle from on high who knows where, factories should be built and where they should be shut down. Of course not. And I hate that when he personalizes politics in that way. I think it's an abuse of power, frankly.
Do you think Trump is serious about trying to get to forget zeros, getting to a lower tax, lower trade barrier, no subsidy or lower subsidy environment? Or is this really just about sort of beating China in sort of a silly binary way?
Well, first of all, I think it's a very smart negotiating tactic. I mean, look, I can't get into his head and tell you what he really, believes, because frankly, he's got an angel and Larry Kudlow on one shoulder, and he's got a devil, and I'm not going to name who that is, on the other, whispering. So, some days he says he is for zero tariffs, sometimes he says he isn't. But as a negotiating tactic, it's very wise. It's basically, it puts the tables on the Chinese. We're not the bad guys. They are. Trump is going to go to Argentina, and he's going to say, look, let's get to zero. We'll eliminate our subsidies and our tariffs if you eliminate yours. Their tariffs are 3 times higher than ours are. And I think it's a smart strategy. Whether he is willing to go all the way to zero, I can't really say, but this is the battle of our lifetime, really. I mean, this is the most important thing. If it's not global warming, it's not climate change. These idiots have put out this report about, how about these guys saying, all right, by the year 2100, if we don't, put a huge tax on our energy, our economy is going to be, 10% lower. I'm like, wait a minute. The people who can't, I do this every day, Dan. The people who can't even tell us what the GDP is going to be next year.
Yeah.
I'm predicting what the GDP is going to be 80 years from now. I mean, the absurdity of that report. Sorry to change the subject. But
no, they can't even sell
column on this.
They can't even sell the Parisians on that. Yeah. No, I know.
Exactly. I mean, and this idea that somehow look. I don't know if climate's been changing for millions of years. We don't know what's going on with it. The idea that these climate scientists know what's going on is and that they can affect that somehow through government policy we're going to change the weather. I mean, really, these are the people they can't even run the school system in Chicago. They can't even teach kids to read, and they're going to change the climate.
All right, he is Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal columnist, chief economist for CNN. Steve,
I know what you're saying, Dan. You're saying I'm a denier.
You're a tariff denier. You're a tariff denier, not a climate change denier.
Moved on from the climate.
Steve,
all right, guys. Have a great week. I'll talk to you next week.
Take care.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.